to Daology. I'm Paul Wang, aka Xuan Dao, and I'm here with a dear sister of mine. Actually, she could be a sister.
Yes, we could.
Not just like sis, spiritual sis, but or soul sis, but we're both from the same country, Taiwan, same city, same neighborhood, Zuoying in Kaohsiung. For those of you who know, you know.
It's incredible. Took 40 years.
Yeah. We probably were close to each other in the same hospital, or yeah. So we're trying to figure that out, see if we actually do have relatives. Most likely we do. So how we met was through a mutual acquaintance, one of my students who introduced me to Belinda because she had visited some land up in Mount Shasta. Some of you who are in the spiritual circles have probably heard of Mount Shasta as sort of a sacred center, energy center or vortex of our planet. And so she went to visit Hestia, as the name Belinda gave to this land, and just raved about it and said, also, besides the land, you have to meet your Taiwanese long lost sister. And so the next time I was in the area, I had been to Shasta a number of times, but I think a month or so later, me and a group of friends went to visit, and Belinda was gracious enough to host us and give us a magical tour of the chakras, the energy centers of the land. And so we hit it off quite quickly, and also soon thereafter we also planned for me to go and be a sort of guest teacher or guest healer for it was the fall Equinox, right?
Yes.
Just a few months ago. And so so we are planning actually to collaborate even in the coming year. We actually already started this collaboration. We did one episode of what Belinda is calling the School for Seasonal Living, which we can perhaps weave into the conversation, or link into the descriptions at some point. But the main theme for today is just I want to kind of get to know Belinda's story, and her journey, her vision, kind of the why, and maybe even the what and the how. And so to start out the conversation, maybe we can start there since I mentioned it about Hestia, the retreat center in Shasta. Maybe you can give a brief kind of, or take your time, description of, this baby that you help to steward and bring and offer to all the visitors. And like I said, I was there and I stayed in the Mongolian yurt, which she warned me, about the effect, and especially in the dream. So I had a lot of powerful dreams. So my experience, it's really quite a special landscape, and I just want to hear your kind of maybe the origin story of that, or how you see or how you offer the space.
Yeah, well, thank you for this opportunity to speak with everybody. And I will say that if, even 10 years ago, if you asked, what would your life be like? What are you going to be doing? Could never have imagined that I would have the privilege of stewarding a sacred land in Mount Shasta. And basically, I think many of you could relate to this. Some of the most critical decisions we make in our lives don't come from a place of planning and logic. They come from the synchronistic invitations that can emerge when you're in a state of transition. So in 2014, I was just coming back from living in Santiago, Chile. Just got back to the Bay Area. I had been overseas for 7 months, and I just really felt like I didn't want to be in the city as much, and I felt kind of ungrounded. And a friend of mine said, well, if you need grounding, the best place to go is the root of the earth, the root energy. And I said, well, great, where is this place? And she said, it's just, 4.5 hours north of Oakland in Mount Shasta, California. And so a friend and I just took this kind of random trip for 1 week. And we found this place called Stewart Mineral Springs,
Yeah.
which no longer has the same name.
Yeah. Okay.
But there was this beautiful place where a lot of the Native American tribes, the Karuk, the Shasta, the Winnemem Wintu, they all knew that the water was very, very sacred.
Yeah.
And this is a place where you can soak in the minerals and you feel physically and spiritually cleansed and purified. And so literally I had the honor of being able to be there for 7 days. And where the land is located is it's just off of Highway 5.
Yeah.
And then you end up in this canyon and you just drive through this one road.
That's beautiful.
Hugging, 2 mountain ranges, and you're at
Yeah.
the bottom. And so you can kind of get a feel for the land in a very intimate way because it's not, vast. There's not lots of things. And I remember seeing this land where there was a bridge and there was the beautiful creek, the sacred water flowing through. And there was this no trespassing sign, and then there was this for sale sign. And I was like, oh, this is a very interesting mixed message, please come in and, don't walk, don't trespass.
Yeah.
And every time we would drive by this road past this house, I just felt an invitation from the trees. And there was one in particular that this one tall cedar tree, it was actually growing away from the A-frame house. And that tree was literally my anchor point. And, by the end of the 7 days, I realized, wow, no one's living here. So I'm going to just pretend that I got lost. And when I set foot on the land, crossed the bridge, walked on the land, touched that tree, I felt like I was coming home. And I was coming home to something that I had really yearned for, to be that kind of intimate relationship with land, to be welcomed. And it was a feeling that I kept holding on to, like, this is something that I need to explore, even though it was this random place. I've been there for the first time. But it felt like if you say yes to this relationship, it will change your life and your destiny.
Wow.
And so I ended up bringing people every single month for 4 months to experience this land. And every trip, there was something profound that happened.
Wow.
By the 3rd month, the friend that had told me about the root chakra of the earth, she said, okay, it's my turn to be invited.
Okay.
So we went and we stayed in the mineral baths of Stewart Mineral Springs. And she had this beautiful deck of oracle cards from goddesses all over the world, and said, okay, let's have an intention. Let's pick the guide for each of us. And I went very carefully. I picked the card, and when I turned it over and I read it, it was Hestia, or Hestia in Greek pronunciation.
Okay.
And when I read about how this goddess is the goddess of the fire, the sacred fire, the community, the hearth, the home, it was clear that it was talking about this land.
Yeah. Wow.
And so by the 4th month, it was like, okay, let's, my partner and I, Peter, we gathered the resources that we had and talked to a financial planner, and it just felt like this was a risk that was worth taking.
Yeah.
And by the 5th month, November, it all manifested in the form of paying a mortgage.
Yeah. Oh, this thing. Yeah. So I forgot about the card thing with the Hestia. I forgot that was the origin of it.
Yeah, just the fact that the name came,
right.
and it was so aligned to the intention.
Yeah.
It was like you can't doubt
the
alignment here.
Right. And actually, before we recorded, I had a deck from Autumn Sky. Some of you may know this artist, and so what Belinda just said about laying out the cards and feeling them out, it's very interesting to see how you tune in, and then the card you drew was spaciousness, right? And,
yes.
That's kind of related actually to our previous conversation about the seasonal living, this kind of wintering time and how that's important, and I know you also host like these sabbaticals, right? And in the different seasons. Actually, that was one of the formats that I came to, right? The special kind of fall equinox sabbatical. But before we go kind of more into like the the offerings that that you've created in this sacred container. I guess two things. One is I want to acknowledge the water. Yeah, same thing. Like I've been to hot springs all over the world, and also most of the main ones in Northern California. But when I got to experience the water, then known as Stewart Mineral Springs, I was really touched literally by the information that was there. And some of you may have heard of Dr. Masaru Emoto, who is this late Japanese researcher. I think he called Hidden Messages of Water. And so basically, how water has not just H2O, it has other kind of supercluster structures, and depending on the kind of music or the kind of sayings or intention, it affects let's say the symmetry of the crystallization of the ice when you try to freeze it. So if it's like something more harsh, then it's kind of less symmetrical, and if it's like Beethoven or I Love You, then it's more symmetrical. Yeah. So so when I went to visit, I was like, hey, this is that same road, so that's one thing. The thing that I want to then kind of go a little bit deeper is, since you mentioned the cards and you mentioned this tree and the land, one thing I really kind of impressed upon me when I met you, and even actually that group that I brought, they said it about you. We talked behind your back after, and then one of our friends, he's like, oh, what a cool person, or what a cool human. I was like, yeah, and then some of them were kind of agreeing and concurring about your, let's say, feeling, or the kind of almost like the sense, the sensuous part of how you can feel and experience, pick up on, let's say, whether you're doing the cards or like the tree, which named Zora, right? Mm-hmm. Which I was honored to meet. So can you just, for those of us maybe who don't have, never, or think it's a bit woo or whatever, I believe, because of my cultivation, and I have developed a certain sensitivity in my own way of how I experience nature and animals and people. But I'm always curious about how other people try to find the words, right, to express something that's kind of maybe ineffable. But how would you express like what you feel about even that trespass versus welcoming, or yeah?
Yeah, and I have to say, I was not, before that 2014 moment, I was not someone who really spoke to trees. I mean, I know of those people, and I still consider myself very much a novice in that way. I think it was interesting because the beginning of the stewardship, the courting period started in the summer. The actual anniversary of the starting point was November, which was fall. And at that time, I remember spending a lot of time on the land, and coming from the city in Oakland, where there's lights everywhere, and there's this feeling of eternal spring. I was really struck by how the wildness of nature, when there is no light pollution, it is the dark, the becoming of the darkness, right? Yeah. I was really struck by like all of those elements of nature that's actually very primal, and it taught me a very important lesson around the slowing down that happens from fall to winter, and the embracing of darkness, and I think it was that very sensory experience of that shift in the season from summer to fall that pushed me to really observe in a new way, because it was a new environment, and it felt very wild. It wasn't contained. It wasn't human made. It was very much of the earth. And I think I also experienced a stillness in the darkness, in the slowing down, that allowed me to listen and hear things that I normally probably would be too busy to tap into living in Oakland. And I think the first lesson I learned in the first couple of years on the land was patience.
Okay.
and watching how nature is not rushing to go from one place to another. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that then stillness then allowed me to actually receive insights.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think without the stillness, I could not be more aware. I could not even receive these gifts that were just like literally in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. That I really relate to that. And in fact, I've had similar experiences, and even on the land in Hestia. And so when I transmit or teach, what I call self-care cultivation or whatever Dao cultivation, I try to use those very same medicines. Like I didn't just pull it out of thin air. I had experiences like that, and then I tried to almost distill. And so, we talk about energy centers. I mentioned it, or like Mount Shasta is an energy center of the earth. And as an acupuncturist, we work on these more minor energy centers. But there's three main ones that correlate to your mental, emotional, and physical: upper, middle, and lower, head, chest, and belly. And so just to kind of relate and maybe share that I kind of coined like the three S's, and two of them, actually the third we also mentioned in the card. So up here, let's say start from the bottom, and this is what I kind of shared a little review from the fall equinox, was kind of internalizing the energy of stillness, right, in that lower center. That is as an antidote to the speed, right? And what's beautiful is going almost like a pilgrimage, or it's almost like you were called, right, to a place which just, except for maybe the winds, like, because nature is relatively still, right? And for a lot of people, maybe they go at that speed until something crashes, and then they're forced to be still, like, I don't know, like stroke or accident or something like that. So a lot of people, I think, they don't realize that they're missing that medicine until they take it. It's like, imagine someone like thirsty, then they feel off, but they don't know why, right? It seems obvious, but then, here, drink this. No, drink it. Oh my God, right? And so stillness kind of in the embodied physical center, and then here is the energy of space as a sort of antidote to the stuffiness, all the stuff we accumulate emotionally too, right? So cultivating an energy of space, which if you're on the land, I mean, there's plenty of space, right? To really expand into, versus in the city, like you said, there's like so many just artificial man-made objects, right? Even unseen ones, like maybe EMF fields that are just hitting us, right? And then thirdly, you mentioned, I don't know if you used the word, but you were talking about hearing. And so up here, silence, right? To not just to dull out or numb out, like noise canceling. It is in order to then hear that inner voice of the higher self that is, maybe it's speaking at like 50 decibels, like maybe at this loudness, right? But the other noise, that often is socialized, like I have to, which maybe before was you have to, right? From mom or from society, right? Those are maybe 100 decibels, 200 decibels, right? So if something is talking so loud like this, right, blah blah blah, then you don't hear that kind of what some traditions call the still small voice. So yeah, so I'm when visiting Hestia, like I immediately, why I kind of agreed to then kind of agree to the invitation that to go to the land and kind of synergize with the container that you're stewarding, is because I was like, it's my jam. and it's almost like, not to dismiss it like it's a prop, the land as a prop, it's actually the thing, right? But just the so some people are like, I can't be still, right? But you can do it in the city too, but if you can just like look out into the land and see the stones, it's like that for the last whatever 1,000, 2,000 years, it has an energy of stillness. And then you can just look at it and just kind of open up to it, and then maybe breathe it in, right? So there's all these, let's say like Dao friends or allies that you can find in nature out there, that actually the only reason we, I think, feel good when we connect to that is because it's also in here. Something has to tune and harmonize.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is very, it's so simple, but it's also so special. Like, we don't know what we're missing until we get a taste of it. Like, oh my God, like, so you use this word, which it's also impressed upon me. I've heard it before, but I haven't met that many people that actually I can feel when I met you what it meant to you when you use the word steward. Because I've heard people say, a more kind of casual way, like, buy land or own land or whatever, property, kind of a more objective way. Whereas when I hear steward, I mean, I don't want to like put words in your mouth, but it's more, there's kind of a reverence there. There's kind of a more, almost like intersubjective. It's not just like a thing. And so could you speak a bit to what stewardship means to you?
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful question. I think early on, it was really a deep listening to the land of, what do you want me to do? How can I best serve you? And so I think stewardship and service to me are very connected. And one of the things, I was very innocent. I'd never done anything like this before. This is the biggest responsibility I feel like I've ever signed up for, from a place of real innocence. It really came from this heartfelt desire to be more intimately connected to nature, not just in the form of, I'll go for more hikes over the weekend, but like, I want to really take care. I really want to get my hands dirty. I really want to be there. I really want to have that kind of deep relationship. And I started to think about, how do I describe my role? Caretaker, owner. I really wanted to avoid those words because I think we have a legacy of human legacy of unconsciously extracting or thinking that we're entitled to things from Mother Earth when it's a gift.
Right.
And so that word, of all the words I found, felt like the best way to remember my responsibility and not take for granted the gift that I was given. And for the first 4 years, what stewardship meant was really paying attention and really watching and observing and not adding anything, not tinkering with the natural order. And so it was really just like making better what was already there. The A-frame house was there, so we took care of that. We added things around there. There was like a little shack that was down the road along the creek, and it was the eldest son of the family who had built this little shack. And I remember going for these walks up and down the land all around, and at one point I kind of started to feel like, wow, maybe there's some potential here. If we ever had a retreat, maybe there would be nice to have another space for the organizers, or if it was one or two people that wanted to enjoy the land, having an A-frame house was maybe too much space. Right. And so I remember visiting this little shack and just kind of asking, like, well, what do you want to be? What is it? What do you want to, how do you want to be utilized? And I was kind of interested in the idea of yurts at the time too, and I kept really wanting it to be a yurt, and it was interesting. Every time I would ask the question, what do you want to be? Maybe, do you want to be a yurt? I would get this like very strong contraction in my body, and so when I feel contraction, I sense that that's kind of a no. Yeah. It's not this like open, expansive, abundant feeling. It's like a tightening. I was like, okay, the land does not want a yurt there. And so I just accepted that. And, I remember another time I went back again and I said, okay, well, I get it. You don't want to be a yurt. Tell me. And it was interesting because in that place of stillness and real openness to hearing, I got the word resurrection. And from that word, I gathered that it just wanted to be an A-frame. It just wanted to be restored. Yeah, okay. It didn't want to be circular. It wanted to be a triangle. And so then it was waiting for, okay, well, if you want to be resurrected, then let's invite in the person that is going to be the builder.
Right.
And it was that lesson of waiting, not orchestrating, not trying to find, because it was also, I found that it was very hard to find people. Like people in the rural areas, they don't use Google.
Yeah.
It's very much relational. So you would find someone through somebody else.
Right.
And so it's really waiting for someone out, putting it out there, and then waiting for the answer to come. And our contractor we had worked with, he actually ended up connecting us to someone from another construction project who ended up being the person to resurrect this cabin.
Yeah. Yeah, more and more, that I see that it's not the folly of youth. It's also just maybe the folly of our culture. Like, because when you're speaking like you do, in my contact with like more indigenous peoples, people closer to living closer to nature, like say in Taiwan, there's the Aboriginal tribes that are acknowledged by the acknowledged by the government there. But in my kind of visiting of them, right, and also you mentioned like the Yurok, and then there's also the Karuk and Hupa. There was a time where I was traveling up to Orleans, not New Orleans, but Orleans in California, far north, like in the Six Rivers Klamath region. I got to spend time, with people who actually had this reverence intact, let's say, because I forget which of those tribes was one of, if not the only ones that were not relocated. Speaking of land, right? And so, and once you do that, right, and that happened actually to like a lot of cultures, we kind of have amnesia to that. Then not only do you lose your sense of belonging, but everything we're talking about, that contraction versus expansion, that kind of relational embodiment to the more than human, right? And so so I want to go more into like how Hestia developed, but I actually want to dig a little bit deeper to your personal kind of story, not necessarily historical or biographical, but like where does that come from you? Like I said, that okay, if you have a culture that it's passed on for a 500 generations, so it's like you take it for granted that you don't own land, right? And that at best we steward it or wildcraft or whatever. So for you, is there something in your childhood or background in relation to nature, or something you read, or just maybe someone from your family that or something? Where does that come from? That sense of what I feel is kind of a really deep reverence, actually, and respect for this relationship. Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it was a right moment in my life where I was in such a point of transition where I wasn't satisfied with the way my life was going. Like, I think I have traditionally been more of the, what you think of model minority, achieving Asian American, experience, where it was very much like, go to school, go to grad school, be successful externally. I did a lot of my professional work was in nonprofit education and training and professional development in large urban school systems. And that was kind of the world that I was like, wow, it's so purpose driven, but there is something that is not well. Like I felt very off balance. I felt very, prioritizing work, being more of the yang energy, more masculine in the way that I would tackle my life, and impatience and tiredness and all these things. And I think I was able to be uncomfortable enough where I realized like that paradigm is not working for me.
Okay.
And nature has always been the place for me to find myself. And, going for walks, in nature, that has always done more for me than yoga or even meditation. And so there was a clue there. And then I think what happened on the land was it was a remembering, because in my maternal line, my mother's side of the family, my mother is an avid gardener. I've tried, I'm not great with gardening. But as I've watched her and I've learned from her and how she looks at nature as a gardener, and gone back to Taiwan and met with some of my elders there, especially on her side of the family, everybody came from very deep connection to land. My mother's side of the family were, stewards of land. They lost a lot of that land during the Japanese occupation. So there was also kind of that displacement idea that you were talking about. So I think I'm piecing it together now and realizing that it was a remembrance. And the land was such a deep and strong connection over the years that it helped me make that connection.
Yeah, that's what I sensed. That's what I was trying to, not like, oh, there it is, but I sense that there's something, it's not just like, urban lady, needs a break from burnout and, I mean, the land itself, but there seemed to be another, a loop that was running, and that's true. It's nothing mystical, like intergenerational things, even if it's not like conscious, it's subconscious that's carried, So that now kind of made me flash to, we had previous conversations about like what you envision, and when I was doing this kind of loop thing, because you mentioned Taiwan, right, and then there's Hestia, so can you share your idea of this kind of web of, let's say, sacred land stewardship? That's the word I was thinking of, reverence, like sense of the sacred, which, like in our modern life, it's a little bit aside, where in more, let's say, natural living, it's more the center, sacredness. So you had said that, going to visit Taiwan, and you had part of your extension of your vision, or maybe that sense, or whatever's coming through you in terms of tending to the land, maybe to have like sister sites. Yeah, can you speak about this kind of mandala?
Yeah, how this vision has unfolded. I mean, I think the first 4 years, it was very much taking care of the land, listening, understanding. And what I'll also say is, while this relationship was deepening, we had community in the Bay Area that we, friends that we started to bring to the land.
Okay.
And every time this would happen, I would notice how deeply transformed people would be. And it wasn't because I was trying to orchestrate it. It would actually be because they met themselves there, because they had the opportunity and the spaciousness to see themselves in a new way, and also get support from the divine on the land. And we did, one of the things I want to acknowledge is we did consecrate the land intentionally to be a sacred place for human evolution and accelerated growth. Like, because that was what the land ultimately was saying, was, I want you to bring people here who are sincerely interested in their own growth, and for these new paradigms to be created. And it wasn't just like one time I got this message and that was it. It was through bringing people over time, different kinds of people that I knew really dear, and people that I didn't know very well. This thing would happen over and over again, and it happened with me, that I started to see a pattern.
Right.
And once I saw the pattern, I realized that became the mission.
I see.
And it was, and I'd always done kind of community building work around personal growth before, so there was some of that from past. But then what was really profoundly different was I wasn't controlling the experience. When you do training and professional development, and you're even as a teacher, you kind of hold that responsibility for the outcomes. And what I saw from the land was, wow, I just have to get out of the way and let that person have their experience and own that experience. And so over time in Shasta, what we saw was more and more people invested in the land because they had received so much. And at one point, we had started getting too big for the living room of the A-frame house. And this was in 2018, so 4 years later, and we thought, wow, maybe this is the time when we should add something, because we were getting a message that it was getting to be tight.
Yeah.
And so I remember working with this beautiful feng shui master and who worked with the energy grids of the earth, and she helped. I was like, I think this might be a spot, maybe over there, and we would walk the land, and she would tell me, well, this is technically what's happening. You know, water under the ground, or here's a perfect balance. And so we've identified a space that was very grounded, that had room for a 30-foot yurt. And so that was the first thing that we added. And coincidentally, that was when Peter and I decided to have a sacred union, to have a stronger partnership around the stewardship of the land. Because it felt like without that strong foundation, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And so when we had the celebration of the sacred union, instead of contributing to like a registry,
Wish
people,
list.
yeah, people actually donated to the yurt. And so when we had the ceremony, everybody was like kind of a breaking ground of like, this is the yurt. And why that was significant was it was the beginning of learning sacred economics with community.
Okay.
Where everybody had put something of themselves in there.
Yeah.
Another community member was so inspired that she donated the 22-foot Mongolian yurt. 2 months later.
Okay.
We found a company that worked directly with Mongolian families, and they came and they set it up in half a day.
Wow.
And so there was a big growth spurt in 2018 of these two like very significant structures to hold the community. And then from there, we started to grow slowly. So last year, we really got the message that people needed to have a more in-depth relationship on the land. So it couldn't just be only like an Airbnb relationship where you just lodge and you sleep there and then you go to Mount Shasta to visit the mountain. It had to be more intimate. So we ended up creating the sabbatical model so that people would have 6 nights to really sink into the time on the land and notice the subtlety of the water and the soil and the earth and the trees. But in order to really sustain that model, we needed more structures for people to stay. Right. And so that was when we put a call out to the community and said, who is interested and available to co-invest in building 3 more yurts. And that was the whole messy human process of figuring out, well, how do you exchange around money and the things that you care about, what you value? And we designed a 5-year partnership where in exchange for putting in the initial investment to build a 20-foot yurt, our partners would have 4 months worth of time on the land in their yurt, in addition to a profit share. So that way people could also receive abundance from that investment. So time and abundance, which is something that I'm finding is also very important. Thinking about weaving community together is how can we bring together our resources and share that, and also experience the benefits of sharing.
Right. Yeah, that's quite a process, right? And it's very creative. It's kind of it's not it's like you said, it's kind of versus more directed, imposing. You're just letting things unfold, maybe sometimes unravel, and then kind of see where you're being called rather than calling out things. So when I first went to the land, what the image I'm getting now is especially the yurts, they're circular, right? And so it's almost and we talked about energy centers a couple of times. So the word fractal is coming to mind, the sense that you have these different formations at different scales, right? So in the body, there's these energy centers. You kind of zoom out on this particular piece of landscape. You found the energy centers of the land too. And then if you zoom out even more, at the either continental, or let's go all the way to the planetary level. We already talked about maybe Mount Shasta is one of the centers. Some people say Mount Kailash, or what is the one in UK? It's Glastonbury, right?
Glastonbury is the energy point. Yep.
Like maybe the heart chakra or something
Yes.
like that. So, and then maybe this is what kind of the sense of pilgrimage came from, or I don't know exactly what chakra. I mean, Hestia has all of them. I don't know which one is strongest, maybe the Guan Yin energy there. And so maybe it's like your body needed it, like let's just say heart chakra or whatever, that was kind of deficient from living how we live. And then like, mama's calling, so yeah, maybe more than ally, it's more like coming, like you said, into the womb, back into the womb, like the mother. So it's cool to see how since 2018, right, kind of
The
that
expansion.
that expansion.
And like you said,
Yeah.
really understanding what are the energies on the land and translating them in a way where people could relate. So I think being able to be like, oh, I feel that this spot here is heart opening, and to be able to communicate that as a shared story for others to kind of engage as well. Because, oftentimes you go to any place, it's hard to know where to start.
Right.
And so it's been this like kind of gradual curation around what is sacred, and then how do we approach something that is sacred, because that's something we've lost in the modern traditions. And then I think as you're pointing to, one of the things that we realized, I think starting in 2019, was that Shasta was going to be kind of the center anchor for this vision, and it didn't just want to live in Shasta. And so we started visiting. I got the call to visit with Mauna Kea on Big Island in 2019, and it really felt like that energy on the planet was very expansive.
Right.
The land there is so fertile. It's so tropical. It reminds me of our homeland of Taiwan. And I got this realization that, wow, for people to come to Shasta, it's really, helping them to ground and anchor and center and align and vision, like an antenna. And the energy of Big Island is like expansive.
Right.
And so once your vision is at a certain place, there's a time to work with expansion and fertility and discernment around abundance that the land teaches. And so I started to realize, oh wow, so all of these different ley lines, these energy points on the earth, they serve a very unique intention, and it could be different for each person also.
Right.
And to pollinate those energies, those energies are connected on the earth, but are humans connected to those energies in coherent ways? Not so much. So that has become kind of the web that we're weaving now, is across multiple land spaces, across these sacred sites of the world. How can we build human coherence around them in reverence?
Yeah. It's, as an acupuncturist, when you say ley lines, I translate that to meridians, right? And so sometimes actually, for the fall equinox, like you ask for a bio, and then I kind of, afterwards I was editing it, and, so there's this kind of meme of, clinical cosmology, someone that use that term, or cultural acupuncturist, or even in this case, kind of like a, geo puncturist. And by in acupuncture we use a needle, right, and you don't want it to be bent, right, or rusty, right, it should be sharp and clean and aligned. And so it's kind of like we were saying earlier, like the human cultivation in some of the things, like you talk about, that sensitivity and all those energies, is like sharpening that needle. And then, so if you're like a blunt, like, like a rusty needle, like, I mean, there's a certain efficacy, but let's say if someone who is more on the path of cultivation and really does the work of self-care and try to hone their potential, then when they step onto the land, maybe it's not just taking, right? It's also offering something to the land, like bringing something in, I'm not judging the person that's just just kind of really needs to be just held by the land, and receive from mama, so I see this image of you, and I relate, if you relate to this, of kind of mapping also, like, again, thinking of acupuncture. When we were at acupuncture school, we had the the naked man model, a 3D model, and also the two-dimensional front view, side view, and then you see these lines, and to kind of, ultimately all knowledge I think is self-knowledge, including higher self, true self, primal self knowledge, and so and then relating to different expressions of, you said, the divine, right, in different, let's say, kind of forms, and so what I appreciate actually when I went to Hestia is Belinda makes these handouts. I usually just do my slides, but she makes these handouts, and what was really cool is kind of like these prompts, to kind of maybe create some mental shifts and intentional shifts, kind of like I said, that kind of tuning is a kind of cultivation. So there's these beautiful kind of questions, and also the design is lovely too, so aesthetically it's very appealing. And then also there's a map of the land, and so it reminds me, like in Taoist cultivation, there's these ancient drawings, of a human as a mountain, or like there's like the spine is depicted as like a mountain range, and then like the front of the body is like a waterfall, and so it was cool to see, I guess I referred to it earlier about this chakra walk, right? So that was developed from the consultation with that feng shui
Well, it
master.
was actually first just walking the land intimately for
Okay.
many years, and feeling things like,
Yeah.
oh, I feel like this area is a quiet space, and then
Okay.
other community members who are energetically attuned also calibrating around it, and then eventually we spoke with the person who was also part of the community as well.
Okay.
And she helped kind of
Corroborate,
put some
Okay.
words to it, so it was like a little bit of like meaning making together.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, so if you visit the land, then you'll get
Get a map.
get a sense of get a map. Let's see. Yeah, maybe we can start to kind of wind down a little bit, like that phrase for the season. But also in this particular conversation, at least our first conversation here, we'll be having many more in other contexts, I'm sure. So we talked a bit about the development, what kind of brought you to this place. I guess a little bit of kind of where we're at now, but maybe you can kind of specify if there's if someone is curious, I guess, like we kind of said a lot of different dimensions about the land, but like if someone wants to visit the land, like what are some of the offerings? Like we mentioned the sabbatical, but maybe some of the more specific, like logistical things, like someone is curious watching this, like heard of Shasta, but now I know this is cool, meaningful retreat center, and the story behind it. Like how do we show up? What can they expect?
Yeah, well, as someone that has been on lots of retreats and in many different iterations of who I am, one of the things that I noticed is, where are the places where you can just have spaciousness for yourself and really turn on your inner GPS. Because oftentimes sometimes when you're on group retreat, you're still following some other flow that's outside of you. And so that was really the inspiration for, holding space for individuals to come and really take this idea of sabbatical and really embrace the slowness and the spaciousness and not knowing, what's going to unfold, but also anchoring in around an intention. And what I'm finding is a lot of people, they'll go to our website, or they'll find us on Google, and the first question we will ask everybody is, what is your intention? What is it that you're needing? What is it that you're seeking? And oftentimes it's, a lot of people say, I want to come home to myself. I feel lost, or I really need to heal from a relationship or an old conditioning that I want to let go of actively. Or it's, I want to birth something. I want to incubate a vision. I want to get clear about that. And so we're creating this hub or the safe space on the sacred land for for you to do that level of healing and transformation. So you can, find us on our website at hestiamagic.com, HESTIA magic.com. And really there's different levels of offerings. You can stay for 6 nights on a sabbatical. You can extend that to multi-weeks, several months even, in a more immersive way. The past 2 years, we did a winter incubation program for visionaries and creatives to work on harvesting and incubating an idea for 4 months in winter. And really winter was intentionally the season that the land wanted, because it is this really deep slowing down, going deep into our roots, being in the darkness, in the womb. And really, what can you create from a place of your own inner depths and connection from land? No one else influencing you, nobody's expectations. We don't have really good cell service or Wi-Fi, so you're really unplugging. So I can't help but imagine how much you can create from that pure source. And then there's shorter stays, that people can do, and we can customize the experience with all the different healers that are in our network. But yeah, I think it's just going back to like the basics really is what we hold space for.
Yeah, I feel that. You mentioned the intention thing, and we mentioned the cards thing, so I want to also mention the podcast that you started with Omar Bronson, and called Gratitude Blooming, and I was invited to do an episode with you guys too. So that's one of the tools, right, that you guys offer for people who visit, and also outside of that context too. Can you mention Gratitude Blooming and that kind of aspect?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think all of my work is now becoming just like, how do we relate with nature in different ways, and how can nature bring us back to the fact that we are nature? And so Gratitude Blooming was a separate project business that I started same time, 2014. And it was in collaboration with a Bay Area artist called Arlene Kim Suda. And she sketched 100 plants for 100 days. And when I saw the artwork, each plant had a word, and it was a word that came to her in the process of this deep connection, sketching them. And so they're words like harmony and balance, beautiful sadness, joy and presence. And so these are like virtues that nature is speaking to her. And so I thought, wow, we have to capture this wisdom in a way that can guide our daily lives. And so we took 39 out of the 100 and created a card deck called Gratitude Blooming. And it's one that I like to pair with the experience on the land for people that need a little bit more guidance, but still very self-guided. So it's a way for you to kind of get insight from nature with the cards as a scaffold, to deepen into your intention. Imagine you're on the land, it's so quiet, you're by yourself in your yurt, and you pick a card and you see, oh, it's the wildflower, and it represents trust. And there's a prompt there that can help you start to unlock, well, how do I want to work with trust today? And so it just gives you one more breadcrumb to kind of explore and go deeper. And the podcast is really example of how we are living it as a team. And so season 1 of the podcast was really unpacking the story of the artist and what does that virtue mean to us, and a little bit of also more around the plant. What is the history of this plant and medicinal powers or cultural aspects. And I found that there's so much cross-continental wisdom that of like very universal plants. And then season 2, Paul, you were one of the people that we featured as, the paradigm shifters, the edge walkers, the alchemists of the modern day. Like, how are you pulling from different, disciplines to create your own way of living and being in the world? And your theme was on patience. The chamomile.
That was the card. That I drew.
It was like so perfect to have a Chinese medicine doctor, and someone who is very conscious of the seasons be embodying patience. So I feel like your story and your practices really were help bring to life, like, what does this mean in a deeper way?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was, yeah, all these things, like you shared with your own story, but even just in terms of how we've, kind of interacted and kind of co-created in the last just months. So I guess I mean, we could, kind of close there, but I want to maybe have a prompt. Maybe it could be a prompt for the listeners or viewers too, but it's a prompt that it's an inquiry that I hear Belinda actually present to a lot of people, and it's so simple, but sometimes maybe there's a fear around the asking or even the replying, and the prompt is, what do you need? What do you need? And I think for myself, I maybe, with my background, I consider myself, pretty independent and things like that. So when you first asked me, I was like, huh, I don't know, And so, ever since then, actually, I've thought about that and really trying to tap in, and of course, like being in that silence, stillness, and darkness helps kind of, eliminate the other voices. Like, is this really what I need? Or is this, something that's kind of maybe just an expectation that's not really that meaningful? So that's a question maybe, that you, the audience, can refer to. But if it's not too much, maybe I can turn it to you in terms of, I guess, Hestia or the land. For instance, like you mentioned, like sacred economics. Like, what is it that you feel like you or Hestia, that aspect of Mama Earth, would need in order to continue to sustain or to flourish?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. And it is edgy to, so much of our community are healers and community builders and mothers and teachers and healthcare workers. So a lot of our community are caregivers. And so when you caregive, you forget, the art of asking and receiving support. Yeah. And so I would say, like, one, if this land calls you, or this kind of community calls you, to reach out and join us, on the land or in some of our more online gatherings. I think, Paul, you and I are actively weaving community together, because ultimately we know that the earth is asking us to live and show up in a different kind of way in order for sustainability and thriving to be possible for our future generations. And so I believe that the most important step is to, find people that believe that and want that and desire to have that intimate connection also on land, and just participate. If it's not this community, like, find a community that inspires you to really be courageous about making choices that are really right for you, and being a part of creating the new paradigms that we need. And it is more interdependent than independent. And that's really, I think, ultimately what we're doing is through the teachings of the land, we're coming together to practice together.
Yeah, and your story is a testament to that, like really urban person, and then trusting that call, to ground, to go deeper. And so, so I guess invite you, because I'll be there again in
Spring
March.
Equinox,
March for the Spring Equinox. We have
a week-long sabbatical.
Yeah, sabbatical week. So if you hear this before then, and I'm sure even if it's afterwards, we'll have other things going on. So if you want to meet together in person, that would be an opportunity to do so. So, okay, Hestia Magic, HESTIA Magic.com, one word. So check it out if you're curious about some of the more information about some of the things that we covered. So otherwise, thank you, Belinda, again for sharing and
thank you.
Communicating your story and your vision. And so thank you audience out there for listening and watching. And if you have any questions or comments, I guess there'll be ways to reach out either to Belinda. I'm at daocenter.com. So be well and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.